I'm pleased to welcome everyone today to the launch of Mastering the Music City, Sault Ste. Marie. Before we begin, it's important to acknowledge and recognize that we are in the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territory and that the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, specifically Garden River, Batchewana, and the Métis. Here at the heart of Turtle Island, Sault Ste. Marie was known by First Nations as Bawating. Both names refer to the rapids on the St. Mary's and represent just one of the area's natural resources. Our gathering today is all about creating economic prosperity by leveraging our music resources from one end of the supply chain to the other. Michelle, my spouse, and I arrived here about 3.5 years ago. And it's one of those things that really impressed me about the community of Sault Ste. Marie is that the music scene here, the music industry, is so vibrant and dynamic, and the number of music assets that are here in this community and the talent and the level of performance quality that you have here in Sault Ste. Marie really begs the desire to bring it all together and to create something that is very, very special in our community. So to this end, a local working group, including myself from the Chamber, Todd Fleet, Future Sault Ste. Marie, just raise your hands if you wouldn't mind, folks. Greg Norrie, the Conservatory of Music, Sean Halliday, Local Immigration Partnership, Josh Ingram, the Downtown Association, and Donna Hilsinger, the Water Tower Inn, and Algoma Fall Festival are hoping to put a spotlight on the community's music talent, music tourism, venues, hospitality, services, production facilities, and the list goes on. And all that to really encourage more economic opportunity around the music industry. We want a music city, Sault Ste. Marie, that creates a music-based experience from education, recording and production, space activation around the city, to putting more heads in beds for the hotels and bums in seats for the venues. You know, you may note that this fits also really quite nicely within the recently passed community cultural plan that was developed by Future Sault Ste. Marie and approved by City Council just a few weeks ago. We also want to be able to celebrate a vibrant music economy that drives value for our city in several important ways: job creation, economic growth, tourism development, city brand building, and artistic growth. A strong music community has also been proven to attract commercial investment, along with talented young workers who put a high value on quality of life, no matter their profession. Our next steps after today are to convene those with a keen interest in building a music city to begin our conversation. We thank you all for attending, and if you're interested, you notice that there's a little sheet of paper there that you can leave your name and identify whether you would like to volunteer, whether you would like to just receive our newsletter as a Chamber of Commerce of which Music City will be a component of, so that you can stay in touch with the developments of this long-term project. This does not end just today. This will embrace the community as a whole and will continue to develop itself over time. And it all is about people who are sitting here today and how we activate what you'll hear today from our keynotes and also from our panelists. I also want to just take a moment to recognize our financial sponsors, of course, to whom today's complimentary event could not have taken place. Ourselves as the Chamber of Commerce, but Music Canada, Destination Northern Ontario, Algoma University, Community Development Corporation of Sault Ste. Marie and Area, Longham and Quaid Musical Instruments, and of course, the Water Tower Inn. So I'm just going to take this moment to introduce Greg Norrie, your MC for today. As the frontman and co-songwriter and leader of the Canadian act Treble Charger, Greg has seen a lot of bands over the years. As part of Treble Charger, he has earned 2 gold and 1 platinum selling albums and a number of top 10 hits, including 2 #1 hits for the band Headley. Greg knew he could help young emerging artists. He taught Sum 41 to become better writers, recorded demos for them. As a driving force behind the band, Greg suddenly found himself in the role of Sum 41's manager, co-writer, and producer. They won a Juno Award in 2002 for Group of the Year, another Juno Award in 2004 for Album of the Year, and earned 5 top 10 hit songs worldwide. In 2006, Greg was asked to develop and teach a course on band management at Metalworks Institute, which is one of Canada's top music entertainment art schools. He subsequently became frequent lecturer at several other colleges and universities. Much Music then came to ask for help in creating a pilot for a show in which young, struggling artists were given rock star guidance and direct music industry exposure, and the show was called Disband. Disband followed Greg as he became a musical mentor to young, up-and-coming bands. In addition to writing, producing, and performing, Greg has been very passionate and outspoken about finding new ways for artists to monetize in this ever-changing industry. He became a board member of the Songwriters Association of Canada in 2011 to 2014, where he lent his voice to several causes to support songwriters' rights through new innovative ventures with internet service providers, mobile carriers, and other mediums. Before moving back to his hometown of Sault Ste. Marie, Greg worked on a radio show that he created in association with 102.1 The Edge, which is Toronto's #1 modern rock radio station. The show was called The Custom Culture Show, and it encapsulated the entire culture of music, i.e. bands, live venues, tattoo artists, vinyl store owners, vintage musical instrument shops, custom hat shops, retro-style barber shops, custom car shops, and any place that a musician would frequent as part of their lifestyle. And you can see why he's such a great fit for what we are going to try to accomplish with Music City Sault Ste. Marie. In addition to his achievements with Treble Charger and Sum 41, he has also co-written 2 #1 hits with the band Headley, co-wrote 2 #1 hits with the band Mariana's Trench, and has co-written songs with both Iggy Pop and Ludacris, and co-wrote a song that was on the USA million-selling album for the first Spider-Man movie soundtrack. Please welcome Greg Norrie.
Wow, that did not sound like me. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for coming out. Thank you for joining us. I have the pleasure of acting as your MC today, whether you like it or not. To our friends in the media, you can take pictures as much as you want during the presentations, and then you'll be given a chance at the end of the session to ask any questions. Before we move to our keynote speakers, we have opening remarks via a video from the President and CEO of Music Canada, Mr. Graham Henderson. Music Canada is a trade association that promotes and protects value of music and advocates on behalf of its creators. Music Canada's members, companies, are Sony Music, Universal Music, Warner Brothers Music, all actively develop and nurture Canadian talent throughout the world. Graham is also a past chair of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and serves as several Canadian and international boards and other bodies. He's a recognized champion of creators' rights throughout Canada, most notably through Parliament's 2012 passage of copyright reform, specifically in helping extend the term of copyright for all sound recordings. He's also played a leading role in the creation of groundbreaking provincial music funds, as well as the Music City Initiative, which you're all here to learn about today. Graham has been inducted into the Canadian Music Industry Hall of Fame and was awarded the Queen Elizabeth II Diamond Jubilee Medal. Please welcome Mr. Graham Henderson via video.
Hi everyone, I want to welcome you to Sault Ste. Marie's The Mastering of a Music City. Welcome to the community builders, welcome to municipal officials, welcome to local business folks, and of course a big shout out to my friend Rory Ring, who was responsible for involving me in this event. A Music City strategy is a key to a thriving music economy, and it has all kinds of benefits that go beyond the obvious ones. For example, economic growth, job creation, tax revenue, and of course, cultural development. Music Canada has been working on this issue for 9 years, and our world-renowned globe-spanning research has actually turned up several key strategies which communities of all sizes can use and adopt to grow and strengthen their music economy and their economy at large. And the widespread adoption of Music Cities concept in Canada has been made possible by several key partnerships, and one of them was with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and local chambers across the country. Now, as many of you will know, I'm a former chair of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce and a huge believer in the chamber movement. So I understand the importance of chambers to communities. And it was that understanding which led Music Canada to partner with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce to build a toolkit which showed the way for local chambers who were interested in developing the local music economy. And there's lots of important attributes that chambers have which can be helpful in this regard. They're terrific advocates, they're terrific conveners, they're terrific pathfinders, and of course, lots and lots of terrific business know-how that the music community itself can benefit from. Canada, internationally, interestingly, is leading the charge in the Music City department. We have a number of cities right across the country who have embraced the concept. For example, Toronto, London, perhaps most notably, shout out to Chris and Corey in the audience, Ottawa, Hamilton, Vancouver. But communities of all sizes are getting involved. Even my hometown of Collingwood has been interested in how music can be employed to develop the local economy. And I can also think of Gravenhurst, who has a burgeoning festival, the Muskoka Music Festival, which is contributing hundreds of thousands of dollars to its local economy. But we want to continue our work. We want to learn more about music cities. We want to understand them better. We want to hone our concept. And to do so, we are partnering again with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce to do a survey. And we hope that this survey will turn up better intelligence about what's going on in Canada. And that will enable us to grow the network of music cities and in Canada, but also abroad. Now, we also do lots of work with artists here at Music Canada, and we conducted a survey recently of artists to determine what is it they need. And it turns out that they can use a lot of help from municipalities and from communities. For example, we need to safeguard and protect our local venues. We need to afford them opportunities not only to perform locally, but rehearse locally. And if you pay attention to this, if you nurture this local musical community, you're going to keep those artists in your community. Otherwise, and we've seen this across the country, that community can migrate from your town. Retaining artists in your community also has a benefit of retaining youth in your community. And it creates a more attractive a community for investment opportunities, and businesses are going to be more interested in your community. And I can think of one standout example for this, and it's the city of Austin, Texas, who have a legitimate claim to being the live music capital of the world today, but they didn't always have that claim. They didn't have the right to make that claim. They had to do something. But today, what they will tell you is that there isn't a single pitch that they make to anybody, any high net worth individual, any student at UT that they want to keep in the community. There isn't a single pitch that they make that doesn't involve music. And in Canada, we've got a lot to be proud of, because the arts and culture in Canada are big business. It's worth over $50 billion to the GDP, and it contributes over 650,000 jobs to our economy. So, city builders, community builders, in Sault Ste. Marie, you have an incredible opportunity to lead some innovative economic development strategies that can benefit your local music economy and your economy at large. So congratulations on the launch of the Music City Sault Ste. Marie strategy. I wish you all the best for this terrific event.
Today we have some very special guests with us, all bringing keynote messages about the Music City Initiative. And then following that, we'll be joined by Paul Dingle, who is a Senate Adjunct Professor at Algoma University, and Sean Halliday, who is from the Local Immigration Partnership, both of whom will be part of a panel discussion following the keynote speakers. The panel will be moderated by Donna Hilsinger. Please let me now introduce our keynote speakers. First up is Chris Campbell. He is the Director of Culture and Entertainment Tourism in London. Chris is a veteran in the entertainment, marketing, and event management world. He most recently led a team of exceptional industry professionals through an incredibly successful 2019 Juno Awards. Congratulations to you, Chris, for pulling off such a great event. Chris has over 20 years of experience in both the public and private sector. He currently serves as the Director of Culture and Entertainment Tourism at Tourism London, where he oversees London's music tourism strategy. Previously, Chris worked as the Director of Marketing at the Budweiser Gardens in London, helping put one of Southwest Ontario's newest venues on the map by overseeing the marketing of hundreds of concerts there and major events. Chris has been instrumental in establishing London as a top secondary music market destination. He has done this by working closely with industry stakeholders like yourselves in the London area. Whether it's working alongside local promoters or festivals like Rock the Park, or the 2016 Country Awards Week, which was also hosted in London, or even, as we just said, the 2019 Juno Awards. Chris believes in raising the bar when it comes to hosting world-class events and leveraging them to create calls to action to better our industry and community for all. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Chris Campbell.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. It's an absolute pleasure to be here today. Thank you very much for the introduction, Greg. Last night, I was incredibly inspired by you and seeing everything that's going on at the Mill Square district. Sault Ste. Marie is very fortunate to have you as part of this incredible project with many others in this room today. And quite honestly, the possibilities are really endless. You have something incredible in your future, and bringing it all together, I know you can do it, and it's going to have a game-changing impact on your city. Before I begin, I would like to thank Graham Henderson, Jackie Dean, Jennifer Hardy, and the entire team at Music Canada for all of their work that they do across the country. Without their resources that they provide and their support and the advocacy work that they do, I know I wouldn't have the same story to share today, that's for certain. In 2013, I moved from almost 2 decades of working in various areas of the live music private sector over to the public sector in a role at tourism, where I was tasked to revamp a very traditional leisure travel portfolio and to try to change that focus to culture and entertainment tourism. Just as the momentum was building around the Music City movement in 2014. Music Canada was actually one of the first meetings that I had when I moved to the role at tourism, and they have been a great resource ever since. However, in the world of tourism and destination marketing today, music tourism still to this day is not really understood. In some cases, it's either ignored or it's placed as a byproduct and not the primary economic driver that it is, or that it certainly has the potential to be. However, when we started, there was really no meaningful relationship that our office had whatsoever to the music sector. Nothing. We started from scratch. And when all this started back in 2014 in London, we actually still had a bylaw on the books that prohibited dancing on patios, a footloose law. And that's where we came from. But the tendency at that time, and in the years prior really, just like many other cities around the world, people didn't understand the economic impact that what you call the nighttime economy had. And if a problem existed, the mindset largely was to create barriers or bylaws to make it hard to put on the events. And when we look back at all of the events and businesses and venues and innovative ideas that have occurred since then, it's really amazing. And it's been the work of many, many people, key people, many stakeholders from all over different organizations in London. Despite the fact that we know now that the ecosystem of a vibrant music scene not only has a significant economic impact, but also contributes to city branding, attracting and retaining talent, and strengthening the social fabric of a city, the business of music has largely really been treated differently than really any other business sector. Perhaps even more interesting, the fact that London was the host of Juno Week in 2019, after being told on more than one occasion that we did not have a chance, is really everything that led up to that point. Everything that occurred up to that point that we were able to change their minds, but also what has transpired since. And the result has been the growth of a vibrant arts and inclusive arts community, civic pride, excitement, and a sense of collaboration unlike anything that we've really seen. Music is the connector. It's a universal language, and in our case, it brought people together from many organizations that really never connected ever before. And the thing is, you don't need to ever think about hosting the Junos or do anything like that for your community to have or experience this. Also, there is a clear advantage that smaller and mid-sized markets have over that of the major centers like Toronto or Vancouver. Smaller cities are actually larger and more connected communities. And when we work together, you should never underestimate what we can accomplish. It's undeniable that something special is about to happen and is happening right now in Sault Ste. Marie by the mere fact that this room is full of people from literally every single business area, the public and private sector. What you can't estimate here is the enormous potential that agencies such as your own tourism office or city councilors can have to promote and allocate resources to increase music tourism and the role that they can play. What it can mean when a city councilor stands up and recognizes that the music business is integral to the social fabric of a society. Everyone has a role to play in the growth of a music city. And when you have the buy-in from both the public and the private sector, incredible things can and will happen. Our first step was to bring stakeholders together. Songwriters, artists, festival operators, educators, producers, local independent labels. We got venue managers. We gathered them all in a room and we formed a task force. Together we defined London's music cluster. We defined the purpose, goals, and anticipated outcomes. And together we created a London music strategy that was very unique to our city. And that was one of the most important things we did. And the process wasn't easy. And at times, it could be very, very contentious, different points of view on what the priorities were. But in the end, we developed our own unique 12 key priorities that were specific to our city. Looking back on that, a number of them were very important and resonate. First, we created an ongoing committee, a music committee, that has proven to be valuable. Members and stakeholders representing very different areas within the music community need a voice, and that advisory group continues to this day. Second, we created a permanent music office position in City Hall. Corey Crossman, who Graham alluded to, has been a champion for the music sector locally and has done a tremendous job. And if you can't create a permanent music office position, someone within City Hall has to be that conduit and help navigate City Hall. Third, we recognized the recommendation to study and update our bylaws. And we looked at every policy, every procedure that intersected with the live music business or bands to make it easier. What barriers existed? And that was one of the first things that Graham Henderson told me. Look at the barriers. What are the barriers for an artist, for a venue, for a promoter, and try to correct those. And while that's an ongoing process, it's certainly significant progress has been made. Another key aspect was to focus on music tourism, which is something that I've been very involved in myself within Tourism London. So why music tourism? Well, if you looked at the resources for music tourism about 10 years ago, there wasn't really any data out there. I mean, it was pretty bleak. You could find reports on virtually every other niche tourism market. Everything from birding to cycling tourism has buckets and buckets of data. But music tourism, there wasn't really anything. But we do know, and since then, we've been really putting our emphasis on measuring and doing economic impact studies. But first, there's a few things that we do know. We know that millennials are completely disrupting and changing the tourism industry, period. And every other industry for that matter. In 2020, the millennial will eclipse the boomer in terms of spending for tourism globally. We know that the millennial will travel off the beaten path. They'll travel to the less known areas. They will explore art, culture, local scene. Local culinary, music. And music has been shown to be a primary driver. In terms of annual live music spending, which you could consider including admission to concerts, small sessions, clubs, the millennial spends more on live music than any other segment. We also know from much older Ontario Arts Council studies that were done on arts and culture tourists, which would include music tourists but not be specific to them, that arts and culture tourists spend twice that of any other tourist. They also stay on average of 1 night longer than any other tourist, any other sector. But while we are certain that music had a significant impact, we never measured it locally. And we've had festivals that happened in London for 20 years, and we've never measured the economic impact of them. We finally have started to. And we discovered that annual events, some like Sunfest, which has existed for 25 years, brings in $4.2 million in local spending and attracts 10,000 out-of-town visitors. Economic impact studies are your political insurance, and they're one of the most important things that you can do is start to measure the economic impact properly of music industry, and then share that information. It will help you get grants. It's great information for sponsors. It's great information when you have a contentious issue and you want to show the importance of the music sector. At the same time that tourism began to actively measure the economic impact, the London Music Office did an incredible job, led by Corey Crossman, and he created a music census that really dug into the data, exploring what the live music sector was in London for the year 2015. We discovered buckets of data from the fact that we had 4,620 live shows in a year, we had 875 music students, and $7 million was earned by 1,200 music publishers and songwriters locally. You need to almost do an audit of your area, and that can be done by survey on what your music sector is, and now we're doing that again to see where the needle moves. Tourism has actively been focused in leveraging media, marketing, and promotional campaigns for festivals, concerts, and at the same time acquiring major events. And we've also been the catalyst to help the music sector collaborate and leverage partnerships with the hospitality sector. We've been the conduit to a sector that had no connection previously. And we are constantly in communication with major venues and festivals and operators. We know which shows are doing well. We know which shows need a push. We know where people are buying tickets. We know where they're coming from. And now we're starting to figure out how much they're spending, and that data is very powerful. Community leaders in London have created great programs that have happened since then. We have local leaders have created London Girls Rock Camp. The public library is going to be opening its first instrument lending library in 2020. The music office is constantly holding workshops on everything from grant writing to songwriting to networking. We're doing integration programs between colleges and universities, everything from video games and classical music. All kinds of great things are happening. We run Music City exchanges with other cities in Ontario to import and export our artists locally. And maybe Sault Ste. Marie, we can talk about this, setting up something between London, which would be great. While we recognize that our strategy has been effective so far, we also realize that the music sector requires constant attention now more than ever. So what's next in our plans? Well, we're currently in the process of launching, as I said, our next Music City census that's happening right now. We're measuring economic impact, and we're also actively attracting other music events to London. But more importantly, we are creating more of our own. Many collaborations that would have not occurred without this initiatives. And lastly, and perhaps the greatest legacy so far from embracing a Music City strategy to date, has been an understanding that access to music, education, and a vibrant, connected, and inclusive arts community is at the heart of every great city, regardless of the size. It's integral. And you need the buy-in from city staff. elected officials, education, and the arts community. And you'll be surprised who your champions are. Surprisingly, some of the champions from our great events have been people that worked in city operations, parks and rec, alcohol and gaming, the police, and of course, many private business leaders and education leaders, which you have in this room here today. I guess at the heart of it, we are all music fans. And I believe Graham Henderson once said, "You either love music or you're wrong." Thank you very much to Rory Ring and the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce for having me today. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I look forward to meeting many of you after. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chris, and that was extremely informative. And Chris did, I showed him around the town and what we have here, and he was thoroughly impressed with what's happening down at the Mill Square and what's being built at the Algoma Conservatory and the way that we're linked in the community together through music. So thank you, Chris, for your insight. Next, I would like to introduce you to the 2016 Polaris Prize shortlist, Carole Pope. She is an agent provocateur, pushing the boundaries of sexuality, sexual politics, and the status quo. Her work has been recognized with 3 Juno Awards, multiple Independent Music Awards, a Genie Award, 4 gold, 1 platinum, and 2 double platinum albums. I think I have that right. Her latest CD, Music for Lesbians, explores the funny, tragic things about being a lesbian. Contributors to that album include Peaches, Alan Johannes, and Rob Pruis. Carole is currently working on a musical with Kate Rigg. Carole Pope has toured with David Bowie and performed at many World Pride events. She has a special performances at the AGO and the MoCA, which is the Museum of Contemporary Art in Toronto. Fashion Cares 25 with Sir Elton John. Luminato, the Global Cabaret Festival, the Frostbite Festival, the Michigan Women's Festival, and at least once, if not twice, of Toronto's, Los Angeles, Montreal's, San Diego's, and San Francisco's Pride Parades. She's appeared in a vampire movie called Suck, along with guest stars Moby, Iggy Pop, Alice Cooper, and Henry Rollins. Carole Pope has also contributed music to film and television on several occasions, including Transparent Season 2, Love and Whatever, The L Word, the Trailer Park Boys movie, This Revolution, Queer as Folk, The Five Senses, which is a great movie, by the way, and The Silencer and Cruising. Her seminal band, Rough Trade, was inducted into the Canadian Music Indie Hall of Fame in 2007. Please join me in welcoming Madame Carole Pope.
Thank you. I don't have a keynote speech because I don't do speeches. But I just want to say that I'm all about promoting art and freedom of expression, especially music, especially in these times when the government of Ontario has pulled funding for the arts, which is very short-sighted. So that's why I'm here. It shouldn't be that difficult to be a musician. I mean, it is. It's really difficult. But yeah, everybody, it's good for everyone to promote music, and it does stimulate the economy. And, I don't get it. I don't get it, kids, if you don't want to, help make that happen. Anyway, that's all I have to say, and I'm very happy to be here.
Thanks, Carole. Next, I'd like to introduce David McLaughlin. He's the president and CEO of Destination Northern Ontario. David is a current executive director of Destination Northern Ontario, which is a provincially funded regional tourism organization operating in Region 13. Its mandate is to increase tourism receipts through product development and marketing and workforce development and investment attraction. David grew up in the tourism industry and is the third generation to work in the family tourism business, which was started over 60 years ago by his grandfather. David is also a past chair of the Algoma Kinawabi Travel Association, the OTMPC, Northern Tourism Marketing Committee, and sat on the board of directors of the OMTPC. 1 year ago, Destination Northern Ontario was named Tourism Innovator of the Year at the Ontario Tourism Summit in Windsor, Ontario. Please join me in welcoming Mr. David McLaughlin.
As someone who grew up in Wawa, sometimes I think like I'm on the wrong stage here, but thanks for coming out today. We're going to talk a little bit about tourism, not only here in the Soo, but also across the north and in Canada. Tourism is one of the fastest growing industries worldwide, growing at a 5% rate globally. We're not growing quite that fast here in Canada, but certainly we are keeping pace. Our tourism industry has fully recovered from the Great Recession, and when we look at it compared to the pre-recession in the U.S. 2007-8, we've basically doubled in size our tourism industry. We have provincially a new tourism minister, so we do, who will now not only speak of the tourism receipts, but she will speak to the fact that in Ontario, tourism, culture, and sport is a $70 billion industry. So that's a big shift coming from the minister. There's a lot of synergies between tourism, and we heard that from Chris in regards to our aims and aspirations and the benefits. So certainly when it comes to live music and the music in general, those assets and experiences, they make our communities more vibrant, not only for us as residents, but in attracting new residents to our communities, but also in attracting visitors to our destination. Chris referenced research and that there was a little bit of a lack of that, and certainly cuts to research have made it a little bit more difficult to get accurate figures. But in terms of Northern Ontario, our tourism industry here is about $2 billion, with festivals accounting for about 10% of those receipts. And one of the really cool things here in the north, because we have to travel so far, about 50% of the visitors to festivals and events are traveling and spending an average of 4 days and $600 per person. Those people traveling to festivals events, about 50% of them are staying with friends and family. So there's a huge opportunity for us to tap into that market. So in terms of where we're at in tourism, the north, we've always done really well in avid experiences. So when you look at fishing and hunting and snowmobiling and paddling, we are probably, the #1 destination in the world for a lot of these activities. And so, as we look to grow our tourism industry here, it's really, looking towards areas of tourism that we have not traditionally maybe paid as much focus to, and that new growth is going to come from festivals and events, from music, from cultural tourism, and certainly, looking at Indigenous and culinary and Francophone, all represent huge opportunities for us to grow our tourism industry. When we look at ourselves, and I think we've been leaders around the province. Donna sits on the board of Destination Ontario, and in the third edition of the Northern Ontario Tourism Marketing Strategy, for the first time, we did put an emphasis on culture and heritage. And I remember going to a provincial meeting that was sponsored by Destination Ontario 5 years ago, and I think you might have been there, Donna, and there was well over 100 tourism leaders, maybe close to 200 from around the province. And at the time, it was just at the time of the release of Painted Land, and they played the sizzle reel. And, from Northern Ontario, we got a standing ovation in that room. And it was really for the first time for not only a lot of us, but for a lot of people in the province to think of Northern Ontario as a cultural destination. And I see Joni and Gary in the room here, and certainly that's really been the beginning of this journey for us as we delve into the culture and heritage side of our tourism economy. And one of the big things, too, in trying to attract tourism, you know, here in the North, we've really been dependent on that U.S. economy for so many years. When we look at tourism across Canada and around the world, other regions have a greater percentage of their visitors coming from overseas markets than what we do. So in 2016 and 17, about 1/10 of a percentage point of all visits to Northern Ontario were from an overseas market. I mean, that's really incredibly small compared to other parts of the country. In Ontario, even though 75% of all international arrivals come through Pearson and Toronto, when compared to the total number of visits in the province, those overseas visitors account for about 2%. But that 2% represents about 18% of the total tourism spend in the province. So it's a very lucrative market for us to get into. And certainly festivals and events that provide color and texture to a region, these are the things that are not only going to drive that visitation, but also sustain it and keep people coming back. So it's so important to us. And just in terms of those numbers, to look at it from a Northern Ontario perspective, if we can just get to that 2% average, that would mean a $500 million plus injection into the economy in Northern Ontario and new tourism receipts, over 6,500 jobs, and well over $150 million in tax revenues for all levels of government. So it's really important for all of us that we take the steps to develop the products and experiences for these markets. And lastly, just want to say, I work with people from across the province, the country, and certainly here in Northern Ontario, and I'm not aware of any other destination right now that's embarking on this path. I believe Thunder Bay had started something a few years ago. But there's a real opportunity here in Sault Ste. Marie, again, to be leaders. When we look at tourism, Sault Ste. Marie has always been a leader on the provincial stage, and I think you're definitely on the right track, and this will definitely, seeing this move forward, will not only make it a better place for us to live, but it also make it a more enticing destination for those world travelers. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, David. I'd like to now invite Sean Hadley from the Local Immigration Partnership and Paul Dingle, the Senate Adjunct Professor from Algoma University, to join us at the panel table, as well as Chris and Carole and Dave, if you could join us. And we're now going to move into the panel discussion segment of the afternoon. Today's panel is going to be moderated by Donna Hilsinger. Donna has more than 40 years experience in tourism and hospitality industry. She's very involved in her community across multiple areas and has volunteered her time over the years in tourism, trail development, arts and culture, education, healthcare, child welfare, social services, the LGBTQ advocacy. She is a 2008 Northern Ontario Business Influential Women Award winner. Congratulations on that, Donna. She has been a past chair of the Tourism Sault Ste. Marie Management Committee, past president and current volunteer executive director of the Algoma Fall Festival, chairperson of the Sioux Trails Advocacy Committee, member of the Ontario Tourism Marketing Partnership Board, a damn fine city councillor right now, and current chair of the Sault Ste. Marie Police Services Board. In 2012, Donna was awarded the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal for Community Service and the Chamber of Commerce Athena Award. In 2013, she received the Leading Women Building Communities Award from the province of Ontario, and in 2014 was awarded an honorary member of Algoma University and recognized at its annual John Rhodes Scholarship Dinner. In 2015, Donna was recognized both by the Chamber of Commerce and the United Way for outstanding contribution to the life of the community. She is a passionate believer in the city of Sault Ste. Marie as the best place in Canada to live and work. Please welcome our moderator, Donna Hilsinger.
This is a damn fine day, isn't it? Who's percolating like with excitement and wonder and saying, can we really do this? And think about all the opportunity that exists here besides me. Yeah. Yes. Yes, this is very, very exciting, and I thank all of you for taking time out of your day and for traveling here to Sault Ste. Marie to be part of this this launch and this amazing opportunity for us to claim our stake in the music industry and the music industry business. So I have a question for Carole and David and Chris. And Carole, if you'd care to go first. And the question is, what can our community do to attract and become a most favored location for artists? What's the most important things and the best attributes? What should we be doing?
Probably social media and just encouraging musicians to come up here and play, and word of mouth, I think.
Like musicians telling other musicians that this is a great place to play.
Exactly. I mean, that's how I heard about your festival, from other artists and from Women Fully Clothed, and
right.
You know, and people just say it's a great festival and a great place to play, and I'm like, I'm in.
That is kind of what she did, actually. And of course, the reverse could also be true for our musicians in Sault Ste. Marie, right? And sort of sharing the stories and having them be able to go out and work in other places. Dave, thoughts on that?
There we're working now. So we were talking about what's happening at the university, and certainly investing in youth and working with them to develop that culture here in the Soo. Also in terms of perhaps appropriate venues and recording opportunities. And really making the commitment and finding the investment to make that happen. But it's all about the heart, and I see a lot of heart in the room.
Cool. Chris?
I think, as I mentioned, it's removing, if there are barriers, and I don't know what they are, it's access to spaces to play. I guess music education is probably at the heart of it too, regardless of economic ability. I mean, kids. The first instrument you pick up is so important. Kids learning how to play, having access to music education, whether it's in school or outside, is important. Spaces to jam at that early age really gets that interest going early. In terms of the bands that are more established, there are different roles that once you set up an advisory committee of some kind, you're gonna be able to figure out what those interests are, collect and have that advocacy, I guess, so that you can develop programs or remove barriers or provide opportunities, because the end result is really incredible, and it does take time. It took us years to get to where we are, but it does work. I mean, it will change the landscape of the city in many, many ways. So
that's great. For Sean and for Paul, could you share a couple of ways in which you feel that the Music City initiative can help Sault Ste. Marie in its goals towards immigration, as well as the attraction and retention of students, both foreign and domestic? Go ahead, Sean.
Well, I think you'd break this answer down into there's the macro and there's the micro. At the macro level, Sault Ste. Marie, like many other communities in Western society, is suffering from a declining and ageing population, and therefore the branding opportunities that come with being a music city would really help the Soo stand out in the crowd, give us a unique value proposition in terms of what we call in the settlement field, that's a pre-arrival settlement. So getting that the international awareness for the Soo would really help. On the micro level, I'll talk about myself for a minute as a newcomer from Scotland and fortunate enough to be a musician myself, and in terms of my own settlement journey here, I can only imagine it would have been way more difficult if I had not been a musician in terms of those connection and social and economic opportunities that have been afforded to me as a musician.
Oh, that's cool. Paul?
I think it's a great question. I'd like to answer by sort of asking you to think a little bit about music as a force within migration. We have a migration crisis in the world right now. Every country in the world is dealing with it. And it's not since World War II when we've had so many people on the move for any number of reasons. It's something that, as musicians, we're intimately familiar with. Our profession has been a migrant one from the very beginning. You know, young musicians travel to meet their instructors, to acquire their expertise, and then later as professionals travel the world to share with audiences. My own training as a classical musician, I draw no difference between Handel, Mozart, or Chopin, the traveling they did, and modern musicians, the traveling that they do. This has a hidden benefit. It benefits the traveler, it makes us better citizens, it makes us wiser, but it also benefits the places we visit. And the source of inspiration, the exchange of ideas, the cross-fertilization of cultures, that's at the base of what we talk a lot about today as innovation and excellence. And one of the great gifts of new digital technologies is now independent musicians can now do the same thing without traveling. They can exchange their ideas and send their ideas around the world. Now, we know music has tremendous powers of healing, of bringing people together. People from diverse cultures that don't even get along together can share a common language in music. And we've seen from South Africa to Rwanda to Bosnia, Musicians Without Borders, and the healing and the peace they've brought through musical activities of cultures that are often at odds with each other. The practice of music crosses ethnic boundaries. It's a language we all know how to speak, and we can create and attract people from other cultures by providing these safe musical spaces for people to be a part of. And directly, in my own experience, I've been directing the Algoma University Choir for many years now. This year there are 67 members in the choir, and 55 of them are international students. They come from Nigeria, from Japan, from Korea, from China, and exchange students from many other countries in the world. And there is this wonderful tradition of sharing of customs. There are students from countries who are naturally at odds with each other. When they come here, they can put that down for a little while, and the vehicle of sharing music is important for breaking down those barriers. One way this community, and it's being worked on now, when you make it inclusive, when you make it engaging, and you give these safe spaces for people to share their musical cultures together, it will attract a lot of people to the community, not only to live and to work, but I think also to spend their tourism dollars in music.
Thank you, Paul. Layers I certainly didn't think about. That's great. So for Paul, for Chris, for Carole, how important do you think it is to have a music education system in our community? Formal, informal, private, public? We'll go to Chris.
Very, very, very significant and important. And it's generally, especially in this day and age, it's the first thing that's cut from a budget, from a school. And the evidence is there. I mean, talk about research reports, music education, whether or not you're going to become a performer for a career, helps you with everything, creativity, maths, teamwork. There's so many benefits for a music education and building your confidence. You know, I think the work that Savannah Sewell, who's a community leader in London, Ontario, did, she started a London girls rock camp. And the start of the week, they bring in about 15 girls between the ages of 9 and I want to say about 12. They've never picked up an instrument. They're doing a concert on the weekend. And now the program is growing, and we're exploring all kinds of different things. And she's working on getting more young girls involved in the production side of the music business. So it's creating those experiences are so important. putting instruments into hands of kids that need them the most is probably key to that.
Carole?
Absolutely. There should be music in schools. I mean, you know, when I was a kid, we had music at school. It helps people evolve. I mean, it's a natural thing when you're a baby. I mean, little babies are into music. I mean, you know, it's just such an important part of your development, I think. So, yeah, absolutely, I'm all for it.
Paul?
This is a deeply personal issue for me as a music educator. I've been a music educator in all the areas your question talked about for over 35 years now. I am the product of an education system in Newfoundland that considered music, art, and culture to be the equal to what we call now STEM, that is being pushed at the national and provincial level. Their guidance and a lot of hard work got me into one of the finest music schools in England. And my time in London introduced me to a world of multiculturalism that still guides the way I live my life. Music education has to be front and center in schools. There's no question about it. However, I would say, you know, the current national and provincial emphasis on STEM is necessary for Canada to remain globally competitive, also to get the tools for us to help climate change, but it can't be at the expense of the arts and especially at music. We're better off in Canada than they are in the States. I remember reading something by an American researcher, Paul Harvey, looking at the funding of music in the States, and he said, presently, we're spending 29 times more on science than on the arts, and the result so far is worldwide intellectual embarrassment. And I think he puts it really, really well. The data, the studies, apart from music being beautiful, apart from being part of the fabric of most people's lives, it has positive effects everywhere else too, in learning, even if you don't choose life as a musician. Many of my students have gone on to careers in music, but also in other fields, and they all say the same thing. The skills they learned in music help them in so many other areas of life. All the things that are desired in the workplace: teamwork, communication skills, self-discipline, creativity. These are all front and center for companies hiring. Musical activity gives you all of those. Einstein himself was essentially a frustrated musician. I'm really happy he was, because we wouldn't have the theory of relativity. But he saw physics in terms of music. And his second wife, Elsa, wrote in her diary talking about when he was coming up with this theory. He went to the piano. I know everyone knows him as a violinist, but he also played piano as well. He went to the piano and started noodling for about half an hour, jotting. And then he just disappeared into his study. She didn't see him for 2 weeks. He came out for food, came out for the odd piano session. At the end of the 2 weeks, that theory of relativity was there, right? Fun fact, when we talk about arts and culture, a lot of people don't know this. Arts and culture in Ontario represents 3.5% of GDP. That's almost $26 billion. So Canada-wide, arts and culture generates more than the forestry industry. It's not a small detail. And on a personal level, with the funding cutbacks to the arts in Ontario, I'd love to see the STEM change to STEAM, put the arts back in it, and you'll have a really good situation. So.
Paul Dingle, I think we should just darn well do that. Okay, that's it. It's now called STEAM. So for Carole and for Sean and for Paul, and we'll start with Sean, you know, we're living in a more diverse and accepting society. It's not perfect, but it's better. And have there been any trends in the music industry where you've noticed that communities or venues or artists have broken the barriers and led them to become preferred destinations?
There are many examples. You look back at the civil rights era in the States in the 60s, and what happened in Motown music, Stax music, Muscle Shoals, musicians, black, white, playing together. it was almost like a non-issue for them. And I think in ways they were streets ahead of where society was at. You look at the island of Ireland and the troubles there with the Catholics and the Protestants. You look at, Thin Lizzy with a black Catholic bass player, full line it, playing with a white Protestant, Gary Moore, Rory Gallagher, U2, one of the biggest bands on the planet, Catholic, Protestant guys there, British, Irish guys. Kind of a non-issue, really. I think musicians were really sort of pioneers in terms of being inclusive and non-discriminatory compared to the non-musical society, and I think they can teach a lot of people lessons of how to move forward. And in terms of becoming preferred destinations, absolutely. I mean, we've already talked about Austin, Texas, but we think about Detroit, Nashville, Memphis, these big music cities, Liverpool in England, of course, with the Beatles, London, the Stones, many others. Havana, Cuba, which probably really came much more on the map after the Buena Vista Social Club and Ry Cooder doing all his work there in the late 90s. So, yeah.
For me, there's the Notting Hill Carnival in London. It's Europe's largest street festival. And it's kind of a sharing between Afro-Caribbean styles and British music. Traditionally, before this festival, there was a lot of tension between the two communities. You can just talk to any of the Metro Police in London. And some genius, who I haven't been able to track down yet, started this festival. It turned into the largest street party in Europe right now. Through sharing and celebrating that way, London's profile as a culturally inclusive city really raised quite a bit. But on top of it, because we're talking about the music industry, it gave birth to a whole new style of music that a huge recording industry now is dedicated to. It's bringing people together and happily making a lot of money for everybody at the same time. The other one I would have to say, I'm a huge Peter Gabriel fan. I'm a huge Carole Pope fan, actually, too. I have to say this, I'm digressing, but it's not that often you get to sit next to somebody whose music is part of the soundtrack of your own life, so thank you very much. Peter Gabriel's work, in 1980, he started this WOMAD, World Organization of Music and Dance, and originally started as a means to preserve the dying traditions of indigenous cultures. That's another issue we face in the world. Languages and traditions are disappearing at an alarming rate. Most of the world now speaks 12 languages, and there's literally thousands of others that are in danger of disappearing. It morphed from this idea into one of the largest festivals in the world, and it has actually had a remarkable influence on the evolution of that new area we know as world music. So those would be the two big ones for me.
Carole?
I would say playing Toronto Pride, when it was just like standing on a little box in the middle of Church Street, and how that evolved and introduced all these new artists to the public. Like, that's the first time I saw Hawksley Workman, and I was just blown away. I think that's done a lot for Canada and Pride events in general, because, everybody, straight people go to them too. And also I would say one of my favorite festivals I played at is Arts Wells, which is Wells is a small town in BC, like population 400. And, there's just all these multifaceted artists from all over the world, and people like Ray Spoon have played there, and I've collaborated with Ray Spoon, and Indigenous peoples, and it's just, I can't say enough about it. Like, small towns like that really, that's where you're seeing some amazing, amazing work.
I'm going to ask you another question, Carole, while you're there. What are the key attributes that you look for when you consider performing in any location?
The food. I mean, I like to perform in places that I haven't been before, and so, there's so many places that I haven't performed in Canada and Ontario, and everybody in my band wants, we're like, we want to go hiking, we want to see the city, we want to go to a gym, we want to eat at a nice restaurant, we want to meet other people. So that's what we look at, and certainly, we're collaborating with other musicians is part of it, and supporting other artists by having them open for us. I mean, all of that. That's what it should be about.
Oh, awesome. So for Chris and for David, how important is it to know your audience in attracting artists and matching them to a venue? Is it possible to control the mix so as to attract more people to your city and your performances? So more heads in beds, or more, I don't like saying this word, more people in chairs. Which is really funny because people who know me know that I, sometimes I don't exactly say the right things, but since I got elected to city council, I've had to stop swearing. So call it managing the mix. How would you do that?
It's really the promoter that does that, or the venue operator will do that. So from my previous role, I would definitely be involved in that conversation. From my current role, I'm more involved in helping wherever is needed. So I'm in constant communication. Some things aren't, not all the shows are going well, so we're putting the gas down on some things. Some shows will sell better. We will actually, it's interesting, in the past, we have worked, our office, tourism office, has worked with music labels, and we'll look at, okay, this artist is performing at the London Music Hall. We know where they're not playing in terms of routing, because so if an artist is all over Canada on the radio and they don't have a show in Hamilton, a couple hours down the road, and they don't have a show in Windsor, we're going to put money there because those listeners are interested in that, and we have access to hotel partners, and we have access to tickets, and we have an advertising budget. So I can go to a program director in Windsor or in Hamilton, and I can say, hey, I've got a meet and greet with an artist, I've got tickets, I've got a hotel room, I've got this, that, and I'm going to do a flight on radio. Well, I've just handed that program director a really big package. So now people from Windsor are trying to win tickets to something they're listening to on the radio anyway. And, for the same, so we are helping that from that side. From the venue side, from that marketing side, it's a calculated risk that you have to take, and you're not always right. I mean, we've done shows that were obvious sellouts before we even, there was one summer I had the only Pearl Jam show in Canada, and that was a no-brainer. I mean, we don't even need to put out a press release. It's on sale and it's gone. We also had Tom Petty's only show one year, and those anomalies, every single hotel room, midweek is sold out in the city. Because people are coming in from literally everywhere. Because if you're going to see Pearl Jam this summer, you're either going to Wrigley Field or London, Ontario. So if you're in St. John, Newfoundland, and you're a Pearl Jam fan, you're coming here because our hotels are less expensive than Chicago, right? So it's interesting. So,
Dave, any thoughts about that?
Yeah, like Chris said, I don't think that's quite my area of expertise. But I'm thinking like two things. So one is, in trying to attract visitors here, certainly, big name acts will help bring people in, and certainly in a smaller venue has a lot of appeal for people who are following a particular artist, or for people looking to come to an event. But then secondly, from a cultural standpoint, in terms of visitors to the region, really matching them maybe more to the music and culture, here would be very beneficial.
Okay. We have one more question, and this is for Chris, before we'll go to take questions from all of you for the panel. What does London try to offer the industry, and how does it leverage existing attributes and look to create new ones? And in other words, what are you doing, and what would you recommend we do?
In terms of, sorry.
In terms of how we identify what you've done there and what your attributes are that you've used to promote your industry. But you did give us, certainly you gave us a checklist of things to work on. Yeah. Are there other things that you didn't already mention that you think that we should be focusing on or doing?
I think as you have to determine your music sector, like I said first. Once that's done and once you have that communication in place, there's the important thing is to have that network. And I have a network with venue operators and I know what's going on, literally with shows. I could tell you next week how certain concerts are performing in terms of sales, and I'm interested in where they're coming from. So we work with the venue operators. So there have been cases where we have done a radio camp or a social media or radio campaign on a concert, and then after I've asked for a ticketing report, like a zip code report, postal code report, and I have found like Sterling Heights, Michigan, and I did some Facebook ads in Sterling Heights, and I can see that people bought tickets from Sterling Heights. How else on earth would they know that? Right. If I didn't reach out and spend $25. And now, if you're traveling more than 3 hours for a concert, you are staying over. And we don't have this beautiful landscape that you have here. So you're probably going to stay more than one night if you're going to come to Sault Ste. Marie. So you have an incredible opportunity here. In terms of the summer programming, I think you have an incredible opportunity here to develop what I see already happening. I'm looking, if you were closer, I would want to do shows here. Absolutely.
Certainly it is a struggle, and knowing from what I do and trying to put together where people are coming from and how they found out about you and understanding how you've used your marketing dollars, it's not easy to do, but it is extremely, extremely important. So, and it is what helps us apply for successful grants and help corporate sponsorship and all those sorts of things. So it's a very important tip. Thank you. Anyone got questions? You can come to that microphone in the center of the room, or if you have a really big voice and everybody will be able to hear you, go for it.
My name is Tony Haller. I'm the Director of the Chamber of Commerce of Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan.
Hi, Tony.
Welcome, Tony. Obviously, we do a lot of stuff together, our two communities, in terms of Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario residents coming to some of our cultural events at our Sault Theatre, Lake State, some of those type of things, and vice versa. So is there ways that we can partner up, collaborate, get involved with this awesome outside-the-box thinking that our two communities can do? Right now we have Business Beyond Borders that we're working on and some other things, but this is something that I think we could make it an international type of situation, and I'm just looking for the panel's impact or feedback on what Sault, Michigan and International, because there's people that are coming from 3 hours away that have to cross our border to come to maybe potentially some of your concerts.
Anybody want to weigh in on that?
From tourism, I know that I work with other tourism offices out of town, and we'll do kind of collaborative, or what's the word I'm looking for? We'll help each other out with we'll promote each other in different ways in different events, and there's some collaboration there. Venues, I don't know, there's different opportunities with media, to work together on campaigns. Artists going back and forth. Music City Exchange programs are kind of unique as well, because artists talk and they have their own social media. You'd be surprised at some of these younger bands, the social media following that some of these young and upcoming bands have is just incredible. And we're watching some emerge in London, and now they're getting on tour with, we have a band right now called Texas King, and they're on tour all over the US. And that's a band that we took and put on a London showcase at Canadian Music Week. Those are they're your walking billboards. They're talking about your city wherever they go. So helping bands out can be really powerful.
On our side of the bridge, there's obviously the university and its partnership with the Algoma Conservatory of Music. There's a Sault Symphony Orchestra. There's a Sault Musical Comedy Guild, and there's all these other community musical groups and arts groups. In the 27 years I've been living and working as a musician in this community, we haven't been able to come up with some kind of centralized body that would help promote, advertise, connect us with venues. The other thing we need in the community desperately is a middle-sized venue. We have the small ones, we have the large ones, but many of my friends and colleagues in a lot of the community music groups say often that they're too expensive to make work, the overhead, the amount of fundraising they have to do. And I know everything I'm talking about is likely in line with every other city that has embraced this new possibility. And first, I think primarily everyone should talk to Chris about this, because he's been down this road and developed something quite remarkable. But for us here, I could see that going a long way to helping promote and centralize. And I can't believe as a Newfoundlander I'm talking about centralization, but but there you go.
We have another question. Go ahead.
More a comment, I guess. My name's Rob Askin, hobby bass player. Sault Ste. Marie's just full of great clients. We've had so much fun here. We've got a diverse population that's a part of it, very much an international business. Clearly, for this initiative to succeed, the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce and its members partner and embrace the performers on stage. We know this is a business meeting and a business strategy. We're talking Music City. The music is the first part, and that's the player, the practice space, and the commitment, and all of that. And the city is the community and the enterprise. And the two are bound together in this. To that end, speaking just quickly to Carole's point where, quote, really difficult to be a musician in many ways, I'm sure, but I'm going to be the elephant in the room and talk about pay at this point. We also heard about Austin. Currently in Austin, they find the need for musicians' living wage. We're hearing about Music City in Austin, and on the other side of the street, musicians' living wage. So I would offer this positive suggestion to the Chamber to establish a web page including a charter signed by your entertainment venue members and their commitment to honoring fair pay for all musicians. What I'm kind of getting at is establishing a reasonable minimum pay that any artist who's signing on to a performance can expect to receive for that night for all of the work they done. A visitor to a show sees smiling faces, the groove is down, looks like they're all having a great time. Of course, there's a lot of work behind that smile. Yeah. And I believe that musicians, as we even heard Paul talk about history, have been taken advantage for centuries. Yeah.
Later today, like between 5 and 7 tonight, talking about industry or the musicians themselves, we're doing a session to talk about, and I'm sure Rory was going to mention this later, but to talk about this process and this idea with the industry. And so that's between 5 and 7 in the Water Tower Pub. Greg Norrie and Bill Priddle are going to sing us a tune or two, and it's a casual time. Chris will be there, and just an opportunity to mix and mingle and learn more about this. I'll be really selfish for a second and just say that the Water Tower Inn is very, very proud for many, many years now to have paid, which I hope people think is fair. I'm wading into this with a bit of caution, but we've paid musicians for many years. We have live music in our pub 4 nights a week, thanks to Rusty McCarthy and many of the folks I see in this room, and we're certainly really proud to be supporting the industry in that way, and it's great for our business, it's great for our guests. Any other thoughts on that one?
I'd like to comment. on that. I'm glad you identified the elephant in the room. And in coming up to speed for today's panel, I looked at what Toronto did, and it was actually, I don't know if this means anything or not, but on April Fool's Day 2016, Toronto City Council voted overwhelmingly to start the process of becoming a music city. And number one and number two of their priorities. Number one was the cost of living for musicians, i.e. the cost of rent, because so many musicians were migrating because of gentrification, were migrating to the burbs and farther out. So it wasn't really Toronto being a music city, it could be Brampton or Hamilton or Mississauga being music cities. That was number one. Number two was putting the pressure on venue owners to pay a fair wage, the very thing you're talking about. And number three was venues. But attached to the venue was asking the city council to relax some of the ordinances surrounding how to put off concerts. I'm sure there were discussions about insurance riders. All these things are kind of synergistic, but it's interesting to note that when Toronto tackled it, these were front and center. So it's not lost on people. These things. I'm also really happy to note that I think it was last year, St. John's, my home, started along this path too, but I can't get a straight answer from anybody on how they've progressed in the last year.
That's okay, and you're not leaving here, so don't even be thinking about that. We have time for just a couple more questions.
Hi, Stephen Finley from Driver's Seat, classes from Franchise Canada. As it comes to shameless plug. Anyways, Southern Ontario communities have a bit of an advantage, even communities as small as Sault Ste. Marie, with direct access to the larger centers. You got the gravity from Toronto, better logistics, inbound flights, what have you. How would Sault Ste. Marie strategize to keep more people here instead of them driving to Traverse City or Sudbury or Thunder Bay for bigger acts and bring more people from the U.S. coming up from areas within a reasonable driving distance?
Dave or Chris, or anyone, but I'm wondering if either of you have some ideas there.
Well, I think from from a Northern Ontario perspective, we do see differences from the research, but those differences could be looked at as either a disadvantage or an advantage. So the one thing, in Southern Ontario, there certainly are more festivals, but the people attending those are more of on the day tripping side, whereas here, because we are farther away, it actually encourages visitation from not only outside the region but from within the region for people attending live music or other festivals. We are, we're not very well connected within the region. And we've been working with the province for a number of years on a northern transportation strategy that's still sitting on a desk somewhere that dealt with a lot of the issues that you're just talking about. But certainly in Northern Ontario, we have 47 flights a day to 5 airports connecting us to Toronto, from anything from a 37-seat Dash 8 to a 200-seat Airbus 321, depending where you're at. But I think, really, it's about establishing yourself as that center, and whatever you're doing it well, and getting that getting that name made for yourself and the reputation as a great place to come and participate and listen to live music. And I think Chris said it takes a long time, but doing it well, should over time get you that position. And talking again about education, I've spent a lot of time in my younger days, in Petoskey, the Petoskey area, and Harbor Springs, and we were always going to Interlaken. So we were, with the School of Music there, and then of course some of your bigger name acts from the U.S. would come and support the school with live performances. But there was always cool things. So I think it's just never been a priority for us here, and making it a priority, we should be able to achieve similar results.
Okay, I'm afraid I'm going to let you know when it's time for the hook. Okay. All right. So we have time for one last question, and if others of you have questions after, grab whoever you're interested in. I'm not sure who's here who can stay a little bit longer or whatever. Dan, go ahead.
Well, I was going to ask Carole a question based on this gentleman's comments. As a musician and artist, at some point you have to transition to be an entrepreneur, or making that shift to make a living, make your band, pay for your band, pay for yourself. When does that happen, and what advice would you have for some young artists coming along? They have talent, presumably they have pure talent, but take it to the next level. Is that this gentleman said that's the underpinning this whole strategy? Maybe you can comment as well.
God, I don't know. I mean, I'm still having a difficult time making a living. But yeah, you do have to learn how to be a business person and promote yourself and make it cost effective. But that's, it's like you got to be able to, you or your agent have got to be able to negotiate a fair fee. I unfortunately have to do that a lot myself, and I hate it. But yeah, I feel bad for a lot of young bands because yeah, nobody's getting paid enough, and you are generating income usually for the venue that you're playing at, and you should be compensated. Anyway, yeah, it's just a learning process. I've had a really bad year because I had spine surgery, and that has impacted, how much I work, and that's something I never thought would happen really. So yeah, you have to plan for the future and try to make a living, and I'm also what else can I do? What else can I do? And besides this, because this is not going to go on forever. I did write I have written a musical, and that's even more difficult, trying to get people to produce it. But yeah, I mean, you keep having to reinvent yourself in order to make a living, and it's exhausting.
Thanks, Carole. Rory, back to you.
Thank you so much, Donna. We really appreciate that. And to the panelists, please, thank you very much. I too would like to say and reiterate Paul's comment. It's not very often you get to sit in the room with two Canadian icons and talk about what great things you can do in your community. To the point, Rob, that you made about and followed up with Dan, it's actually one of the reasons why the Chamber is involved in a project like this. My friend Graham Henderson have talked many times about this and how a musician or somebody in the industry is a small business, it's an entrepreneur, and how do we start to get some of the disciplines within that so that you can do many of the things that Carole's referred to, is to negotiate for yourself or understand your costs. How do you market yourself? What are some of the tools that we can do? There was a toolkit produced by Music Canada for the Chamber of Commerce to actually become a catalyst in doing a project like this, and how you then start to catalyze and bring the many community stakeholders together to bring a centralized focus in creating a brand-specific music city, Sault Ste. Marie, to attract and bring a number of great elements. I don't know if you've seen what's going on at the Conservatory of Music, but that's an OMG moment if you ever have the opportunity to see what they're doing for a one-of-a-kind production opportunity here right in Sault Ste. Marie, partnering with the Machine Shop and the Conservatory of Music and all the elements that come within the industry to promote something that I think is going to be truly unique. And yeah, it will put heads in beds, and it will put bums in seats. So that's the ultimate goal for us to do that. And certainly, and diversity is another component of that. We talk about, cultural diversity of immigrants coming to our country, but also it's how do we bridge the gap with our Indigenous community through music, and we embrace the true millennial history of our Indigenous community here in Sault Ste. Marie. And I always say, and I'm going to pick on Sean again, because this is going to take me a year to figure this out. And I'll try, how do you have a Scottish immigrant playing in a Cuban band? with Jay Case. My mind will not wrap around that. So thank you to our guests, to our sponsors, Greg, Donna, for steering us down this 2 hours, and thank you for sticking with us as we've gone a little bit over time. Thank you to the staff of the Water Tower Inn for preparing a great meal and the service. And yes, go ahead, please. And I think you can hear from the conversation today why it's so important to harness the power of the Music City and to continue to elevate our own performance to the greater benefit of the community. So later today, as Donna mentioned, between 5 and 7, we're doing sort of an informal industry networking event just to bring people together that have a similar background or interest in music or the local music industry. The event's free and attended to host again by Greg, and also Bill will be joining us as well. And we're going to offer a little bit more information. And please join us. Greg and Bill are going to play between 5:30 and 6. We're going to give a little bit of information, and there's just an informal time to get together. So just a couple of points. Live music in Ontario generated a total of 10,500 full-time equivalent jobs. The suppliers and the respending of that labor and income grows a wider economy. The tourism activity generated by festivals, over 9,500 and just additional FTEs, according to Music Canada's Live Measure Up, an economic impact analysis of live music in Ontario. If you go, there's lots of great research material on Music Canada website you can use as a resource. Again, we heard about attracting and retaining talent in our community, getting greater and broader investment in our economy, and recognizing that the world's top talent is highly mobile today. It also puts many cities on the map through social media, and that takes us putting our best foot forward to make sure that we're attracting the right talented young people to our community, which is a major challenge in the environment of intense global competition. So music can be a big part of that recruitment. And really, ultimately, music is a strong social unifier. It builds bridges between cultures, languages, connecting people within a city, a region, and across borders. Tony, thank you very much for coming. Tony and I work closely together between our two chambers to really bounce ideas off of other, and I think it's so great that you're here, and I love the concept, and you and I will pursue this absolutely. So our next steps are to convene with those that have a keen interest in building a music city. You, again, have got the little forms on your table there. Please fill them out. And please keep the communication open. That's what it's about. That's what's going to keep this thing moving along. And just in conclusion, I want to thank you all for participating today. I hope to see you around the table as we start to build Music City Sault Ste. Marie. And it is really, really a very exciting opportunity for us here in the Sault. And enjoy the rest of your day. The media, I know we have a couple media folks here, and if our panelists can make themselves available for some questions, and if you do have time to stick around, if anybody would like to speak to you, we would appreciate that. But we do know you, Carole, you got a performance tomorrow evening as part of the Algoma Fall Festival. Are there tickets still available?
There are. Box office in the Station Mall, online at algomafallfestival.com or at the door.
Or just go talk to Donna. Awesome. I know Michelle and I will be there tomorrow night, so we're looking forward to the performance. Thank you very much, everybody, for taking time out of your day. We look forward to communicating in the future.
What's the problem with you?
Well, we heard today what a significant part of any city's economy the music sector and the cultural sector can be if we make the investments required and treat it with the respect that it deserves. You know, it's millions of dollars that could be attracted into our local economy, but also locally it can allow us to have better music programs in our schools. It can, on the social side for our community, it can do a lot to build up families. It's just such a winning formula, and I'm thrilled that we are going to take this seriously in Sault Ste. Marie, and we're going to make something happen.
Yeah, so part of the Music City, format and concept is to bring together a lot of different parties. So, around that table will be the musicians and the artists, and folks like the Chamber of Commerce who can help provide mentorship or internship from even matching another business person with them to talk about the business discipline. all of that, plus the time that they've put into becoming an artist, deserves a certain return on investment. And what does that return on investment look like? So when you're going to negotiate a fee for playing in a venue, you know, what is that fee supposed to look like to cover your costs, give you a good return? So some of those disciplines, and putting them around the table, also with the venues and the other industry people, will bring, I think, a conversation around to establishing a common ground and an understanding that we're in this together to build a better community. So we're hoping that those conversations will help foster that notion of, you know, moving from I do it just as a hobby to I do this because I'm a professional.
What I discovered was happening at the conservatory really excited me enough to actually move from Toronto up to Sault Ste. Marie. And what they were doing was they were basically building one venue called The Loft, which was a small-sized venue. It holds about 180 people. And they were building a recording studio that they wanted to wire into that loft through video and audio. And then also, and this was the clincher, connecting that recording studio over to the machine shop. When I heard that, I thought, now that's really clever. What a fantastic way to link what's already happening in the community and link it together through something like Conservatory, which was already a hub of education, music education. And this idea, I think, is really what spawned getting interested in this whole idea as a music city. Why not link this whole city's music scene together? If you could get it together and harness it, it could become really powerful. And as we've now discovered, that it actually generates a tremendous amount of dollars in a community. And I think Sault Ste. Marie, because of its a history of support for the arts in the first place, if we can just harness this together, which we really haven't to this day, in the way that Music City has spelled it out to do, this could have tremendous results, and I find this really exciting.